Metaverse, metaverse, metaverse. It seems like it's everywhere you turn these days. Like suddenly everyone's an expert on virtual worlds. But today we're skipping the hype. We're
Yeah.
going deep.
Yeah.
We're doing a deep dive into Reality Labs, the company formerly known as Oculus, which, as we all know, is now a pretty key part of Meta's, their whole thing.
Their grand scheme.
And let me tell you, the story goes way deeper than just slapping on a headset and calling it a day.
It's true. And surprisingly twisty, if I may say so.
Right. It really is. Okay, so to kick things off, let's rewind to the beginning. Picture this. A USC dorm room. Probably messy, definitely full of wires and gadgets, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's where we find Palmer Luckey. Just a student with, some might say, an obsession with head-mounted displays, or HMDs, for those in the know.
And not just any HMDs. This was a collection. I mean, legendary.
Yeah.
Lucky wasn't just collecting these things. I mean, he was studying them, taking them apart, dreaming of building something, just better.
He was like the OG VR tinkerer. But, and here's where it gets really interesting. Across the country, you got John Carmack. And everyone knows John Carmack, the programming genius behind Doom, Quake, all those games that basically invented first-person shooters.
Yeah, the classics.
Turns out Carmack was also deep down the VR rabbit hole.
Oh, obsessed. He'd even built, his own prototype HMD. But then he's browsing online, sees Lucky's work, and jaw drop.
Dramatic music. Okay, but really, what was so special about Lucky's HMD? Why did it grab Carmack's attention?
Well, back then, VR was clunky, expensive,
Sure.
and pretty niche. Lucky's prototype, it was more advanced, more comfortable, and this is key, more affordable. Carmack saw this, and he didn't just see, some cool gadget. He saw the potential to bring VR to everyone.
And what better way to do that than with the biggest game release of the year?
I mean,
Carmack announces that Doom 3, this insanely hyped, heart-stopping shooter, would support Lucky's HMD. Game changer, literally.
it really was. And the gaming world just went nuts. VR went from, this geeky dream to the future of gaming.
And gamers were ready to put their money where their passion was. So Oculus launches this Kickstarter campaign, and this is where things get really wild. They were hoping for, what, a couple $100,000, right?
Yeah, something like that. Modest, to be short.
But then millions.
Millions.
Millions. It was this insane wave of support. Like, the public was ready for VR to step inside their favorite games and stories.
Yeah.
And that's where a certain social media giant took notice. Enter Mark Zuckerberg with a cool $2 billion. $2 billion.
In 2014, that was an insane amount of money, even for Facebook. They swooped in and acquired Oculus, and at the time, it felt like a match made in tech heaven, right?
Well, it seemed like it.
Oculus gets resources, Facebook gets a foothold in the future. I mean, what could go wrong?
Right.
Well, about that. You see, Facebook had this, shall we say, habit of integrating its acquisitions. And Oculus, despite those early promises of this open and independent platform, well, they weren't immune to Zuckerberg's grand vision. It's not like, an overnight hostile takeover. It was more of a slow, a steady integration of Oculus into that Facebook ecosystem.
Okay, so walk me through this. How did this whole, integration actually play out? I mean, because I definitely remember those early Oculus demos, right?
Yeah.
Like the focus on independent games, the whole open platform vibe.
Right. And that was a big part of their, Oculus's initial appeal.
Yeah.
But you start to see the shift with the Gear VR. I mean, it was really cool using your phone as the VR screen, right?
Yeah.
But it was always kind of tethered to Facebook in a way.
Ah, right. You needed a Facebook account for, some of the social features.
Exactly. Then came those, subtle nudges with the Rift. You didn't need a Facebook account, but they made it very convenient to link it, like find your friends, share your VR achievements, that kind of thing.
Like that old saying, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Right.
And then the Quest 2 launched.
And that's when the glove came off,
Mm-hmm.
The Quest 2, cheaper, wireless, way more accessible.
Right.
But you absolutely needed a Facebook account.
Yeah.
No more independent Oculus logins or anything.
And that's where things got, a little interesting, especially legally speaking. Didn't Germany kind of throw a wrench in Facebook's plans?
They did. The German antitrust watchdog, they basically said, hold on a minute, you're making access to this service based on, handing over your personal data to Facebook. Hello, red flag. Remember GDPR.
GDPR, right. For those who may not know, that's the European Union's whole framework for, data privacy. It basically gives people more control over their info.
Exactly. And the German watchdog was basically saying, Facebook, by requiring a Facebook account for the Quest 2 was potentially violating GDPR.
So it wasn't just like gamers grumbling about Facebook. This was a real, legal challenge. Did that have any actual impact on Facebook?
It definitely, raised some eyebrows. It didn't completely derail anything, but it did highlight those growing concerns about data privacy and, well, tech giants having too much power.
And meanwhile, the Oculus name slowly starts to vanish. They become, what, Facebook Reality Labs? Like, swallowed up by the metaverse hype?
Yeah, and this is where things get even more interesting, I think, from, like, a strategic standpoint. Facebook, or I guess Meta, they weren't just acquiring hardware. They were building an empire. Enter Oculus Studios.
Okay, Oculus Studios. For those of us not living in the metaverse yet, what's the big deal with Oculus Studios?
Think of them like, the Hollywood studio system, but for VR.
Yeah.
At first, they funded, third-party developers, helped grow that VR content library, but then they shifted gears, went on this huge acquisition spree, snapping up studios left and right.
And not just any studios, right? Like some pretty big names are in the mix.
Oh, absolutely. Beat Games, those are the masterminds behind Beat Saber.
Well, yeah, that game's huge.
Acquired. Ready at Dawn. The studio behind those visually stunning titles like Lone Echo. Also acquired.
They were basically collecting like top-tier VR talent like Pokemon cards. But it wasn't all, smooth sailing, was it? Didn't something happen? Something about a lawsuit involving Supernatural, that VR fitness app?
Ah, yes, the Within acquisition. That one got messy. The FTC stepped in and actually sued to block the whole thing.
Really? Why? What was the FTC's problem with Meta buying like a fitness app company? That seems a bit out of bounds, even for them.
It all boiled down to, antitrust concerns. The FTC argued that if Meta, who already basically controlled the dominant VR platform, right, was allowed to buy Within, they would be able to, stifle competition in the VR fitness market.
Interesting. So it wasn't just about like one single app. It was about, who gets to control the entire future of VR experiences.
Exactly. And that's where the Within case gets really fascinating, because it wasn't just about Meta's dominance. It kind of brought to light this incredible innovation happening in the VR fitness space.
Yeah.
Within, they weren't just creating workouts. They were creating like genuinely immersive experiences.
Ah, okay. So the FTC saw this, relatively small company doing something really innovative, and they didn't want Meta to just like absorb it and potentially stifle that.
Precisely. It underlined this idea that VR isn't just about gaming anymore, right? It's fitness, social interaction, even like professional collaboration. The Within case, it showed just how much potential there is in those emerging markets.
Makes sense. So we've got Meta, this, behemoth of a company trying to build their metaverse empire, buying up studios, battling lawsuits. But it wasn't all, virtual reality, was it? There was also this whole augmented reality thing going on kind of in the background.
Right. And that's where, the Ray-Ban stories come in, like a curious little sidestep in their metaverse march.
Okay, so we've gone from like, dorm room tinkering to multi-billion-dollar acquisitions, global lawsuits, the race to build the metaverse. But then, right as you think you've got Reality Labs figured out, they kind of throw this curveball Ray-Ban stories. I mean, they're stylish sunglasses, sure, but with cameras and microphones embedded in them.
Yeah, a lot of people were scratching their heads over that one.
I mean, I know I was. It felt like such a 180 from those isolating VR headsets. Help me understand this. What was the thinking behind Ray-Ban stories? Was this like a cash grab, or was there, I don't know, a deeper strategy at play here?
It's got to be more than a cash grab, right? I mean, Meta's whole thing is connecting people.
Yeah.
VR is one way to do that, sure, but it's very much a closed-off experience. Ray-Ban stories, these AR glasses, they were a different approach, I think, blending the digital and physical worlds, but in a way that's more, I don't know, integrated. Less about, like, escaping reality.
So instead of, like, strapping on this bulky headset and just disappearing into the metaverse, you're wearing these sleek Ray-Bans, you're capturing stuff in the real world, and sharing it instantly.
Exactly. It's about augmenting reality, not like replacing it. And I think it speaks to this larger shift in how we think about the metaverse. Like, it's not necessarily the separate virtual world. It's this layer of digital experiences woven into our everyday lives.
Which, kind of makes you wonder, what's the long game here for Reality Labs? Are they trying to create this, like, walled garden, their own little corner of the metaverse where everything is, tightly controlled by them? Or are they open to collaboration, letting other companies, other developers kind of build on their platforms?
$1 million question, right? And I think the answer, as with, most things Meta, is a bit of both.
Yeah.
On the one hand, they've been well, fiercely protective of their hardware and software.
That FTC lawsuit definitely made that clear.
For sure. But then on the other hand, we're seeing some interesting moves. They're licensing Horizon OS, that's the operating system that powers all their VR experiences, to other hardware manufacturers. And there's all these rumors about like a potential partnership with Google to, bring Android apps into VR.
So maybe they're hedging their bets a bit, trying to, dominate the metaverse, but while also kind of keeping their options open just in case.
It's a smart move in a tech landscape that's changing so fast. Because, let's face it, the metaverse is not a done deal. Right? It's still being defined, still being built, and honestly, no one, not even Meta, knows exactly what it will become.
So to kind of bring it all back to our deep dive here, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've seen Reality Labs go from this, scrappy startup with a dream to, well, a subsidiary of one of the most powerful tech companies in the world.
And along the way, they've really pushed the boundaries of, what's technologically possible, and maybe more importantly, they're forcing us to confront some pretty big questions.
Yeah.
About privacy, ownership, even like the very nature of reality itself.
It really is remarkable. And I think, that's what makes this whole story so fascinating. It's not just about pixels and processors. It's about, the future that we're creating. One headset, one acquisition, one lawsuit at a time. So next time you hear someone mention the metaverse, remember, it's not just some abstract concept. It's being shaped right now by companies like Reality Labs. And the choices they make, they're going to have a real impact on all of our lives.